Hey,
So
by the way,
hmm,
Mike, it's 2025. Just calling that out.
I didn't even notice. That's a good catch. All right. So welcome and thanks everybody for joining us at Beers with Engineers, otherwise known as Will and I's favorite workday every month. We are here for session 34, uh, July 24th, 2025. We'll get that corrected. So really quickly before we get too deep into things, always have to talk about the safe harbor notice because we have a tendency to talk about things that are either not released or coming out in sometime in the near future, and we don't want you to make purchasing statements based on stuff that may or may not get released in the way that we actually talk about it. We like talking about new things, so it has a tendency to happen. So, really informal agenda. We'll kind of walk through and talk about each of these as we go. So, why are we here? So, Will and I recognized that there's not a ton of information about the capabilities within ServiceNow to discover and manage cloud native components. And in addition to that, there's not a lot of community talking about it. So we figured let's do that. Let's build a community and let's talk about all these great things. And also, let's be nerdy and drink beer at the same time. So, who we are. Mike Gallagher, I'm an ITOM pre-sale specialist here at ServiceNow. I have been doing this whole technology thing for going on 3 decades and have the gray in my beard to prove it. I lovingly joke that if it has a one or a zero in it, I've probably managed it at some point in my career. I am all about um, Kubernetes and cloud native capabilities. I'm all about technology in general and solving business problems with technology in an intelligent way. I play a heck of a lot of board games. I play video games every once in a while, mostly with my family all the way around. And then I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu every chance I can get. Today I am actually drinking. This little gem is really cool. It is actually out from Jeremy's way and my old stomping grounds. It's from Seattle, Washington. It is Schilling Cider's Imperial Passion Fruit Pineapple Cider. Really fruity today. Will, over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Hey, everybody. Will Hallam. I'm a solution consultant focusing on ITOM at ServiceNow. Uh, Similar to Mike, I've long time IT practitioner in all kinds of different walks of life and technological areas. Right now, just focusing a lot on IT operations management and just automating the day-to-day drudgery that I still look back on, I guess fondly looking back on it. I can look back on it fondly, but in the moment, I definitely spent a lot of time doing stuff that I wished I could just hand off to some kind of automation framework. And now I get to do that a lot. So it's pretty cool. In my spare time, I also greatly enjoy the company of my family. And when I get time, I play some pickup hockey and video games. And today, I'm enjoying a tasty brew from Oscar Blues Brewery in Longmont, Colorado.
Yep.
And this is called Dale's Pale Ale. Just rolls right off the tongue.
Yep. Yeah, Dale's is good stuff, man. All right. So let's kick things off with a few news and updates. So, most importantly, we just recently did a crossover with the Tanium Tech Talks team, which is Ashley here on with us today. And we had an all-star cast from the Tanium house. It was really, really fantastic to sit down and chat with them and kind of talk about where our solutions are complementary and how they work so well together. That was part one. That is now live on YouTube at this link here. And as always, we'll send out the show notes and the wrap up, and we'll include that link with it. And then part two will be in August. So you can start signing up for that here pretty soon. And we'll actually have the Tanium team come on and join us live on Beers with Engineers at that point. And we're going to get nerdy and deep dive on one of the particular integrations. And so if you have thoughts on which integration you'd like to ask questions about, send us a note, drop something in the chat, and we'll think about what to add onto that list as we go. So also, thanks for joining us today, Ashley and Jeremy. Really glad to see you guys, and looking forward to diving in with you guys next month too. So today, our tech deep dive is all about how to ingest metrics data from cloud native capabilities into the ServiceNow platform for the metric intelligence pieces. So, Will, I'll navigate if you want to kind of talk through.
Yeah, sweet. So the push metric API, it's something that has been in one form or another present in the metric intelligence piece of ITOM. So metric intelligence it's part of the ITOM health capability, complementary with things like event management. What's been done recently is to kind of offload some of the processing around taking those metrics and calculating, automatically creating boundaries around that metric data, and then offering up what are called anomaly alerts, which basically is it's a sandbox alert, which does not immediately kind of go into, if you're familiar with Express List or the old alert list view. Anomaly alerts are kind of off to the side, and so they're kind of speculative alerts, which can then be promoted to an official alert based on rules that the customers define. And so we've had that for a while, and also had out of the box integrations that will ingest metrics from a few sources. And we've kind of doubled that, the size of that bench just recently. And so I wanted to kind of talk about that, and then show some examples, and as well as examples of how to tap into that. Because in addition to kind of the out of the box integrations, we also just provide a documented API that can be used. You can push a JSON payload into that API endpoint, and thereby populate the metric base time series database that you get with your instance with whatever metric data you want. And there's actually some really good content that I've run across over the last few months on the community site. We're going to include links to those community articles. And I actually just took one that was part of a 3-part series that our teammate Ramco from across the pond had put together. And I put it in practice. It took me probably about half an hour to take his article and turn that into metrics coming into my instance. So I'm going to walk through that as kind of one example of how you can take metrics from literally any tool and send them in to the ServiceNow instance, and take advantage of metric intelligence, which can then highlight, hey, here's a metric that's ripe for modeling and automated alert creation. And then, so we are going to focus on the ingestion piece. I'm not going to get too deep on the metric intelligence side, because that's like a whole episode in and of itself, as far as all the different statistical models that it uses and how to kind of tailor it so that you're getting the maximum value. But what's nice is that we actually have kind of a full picture from a metrics perspective now. And what I mean by that is we've got metric intelligence, been around for a while. which can actually ingest metrics. And one of the things that we would run into sometimes having a metrics intelligence conversation with a customer is they say, well, I've already got a lot of metrics in my observability platform, and I'd rather not like replicate those into ServiceNow, but I'd still like to get the benefit of all of that metrics data in my IT operations management practice. And so now, just as kind of a little teaser, we've also got a capability called service observability, which does just that. It basically lets you, when you get an alert against an application service, it lets you pull data via live query from those observability tools. And so we're hoping to kind of touch on that in a subsequent episode because it kind of gives you both options. You can either choose to ingest your metric data and, kind of leverage the analytics capability within the platform to, bubble up potential issues and anomalous behavior, or, or leverage live data without having to copy it anywhere when you get alerts against a given application service. And so it's really kind of a nice rounding out of the suite of offerings. So I mentioned we've added new out of the box integrations pretty recently. Those include Zabbix, SolarWinds, and Nagios. We've had the Dynatrace, SCOM, and ACC, Agent Client Collector, monitoring plugin capability for a while. Which, the ACC one in particular, that was another avenue that you could use to kind of select metrics that you wanted to pull in. We actually did an episode focusing on pulling in some of the metrics from cloud providers using ACCM. So that's been there for a while, and that's there's going to be some links in the show notes to some of that content as a kind of a refresher. And so we've got this API now that is the previous iteration. It was a instance hosted API endpoint, and that had some challenges with things like throughput and scalability. And so by pushing that over to mid servers gives you the ability to scale that as needed for your enterprise, as well as offloading. It basically gives a faster response when anomalous behavior starts to manifest, because I'm kind of getting ahead of my, let's go to the next slide, because I think that's got the architecture diagram. And so on the left side of this diagram, you can see that's everything that's being done in the mid server. So we're actually leveraging that mid fairly extensively, in that it's got the REST API endpoint, which is receiving that's what's receiving the data from custom integrations. The out of the box integrations are actually running JavaScript via mid server based script includes. And so it's not like doing any kind of like a loop back where it's looping back and triggering that REST API endpoint. In that case, there's native JavaScript classes within that script include that are basically forwarding the data directly to the metric base. But through one of those avenues, the data is getting into the metric base, and then there's periodic training jobs that are running. And what's kind of unique about this particular approach is it takes the result of those training jobs and actually pushes the resulting kind of metadata back to the mid, which allows the mid to then natively process the metric data that's coming in real time and flagging it as anomalous, because it's essentially, it doesn't have to send it or do a query back to the platform. The mid has the results of those training jobs living directly on it, and it allows it to kind of generate that anomaly alert. And then at that point, the platform takes over, uses the promotion engine is what it's called, which essentially looks at an anomaly alert and then validates it against what are called promotion rules that you define on the instance. And if it gets a thumbs up from one or more promotion rules, then that'll cause it to generate an IT alert. Okay. Next slide.
There we go.
So in playing around with this for the last few weeks, I kind of did run into a few kind of I don't want to call them gotchas. It was more just the joy of discovery as opposed to our documentation got me to a certain point, and then I had to kind of dig in a little bit, look at some of the script includes that are delivered by the out of the box integrations to kind of get the full story. And so I figured I'd bubble some of those up for today's audience so that you don't have to necessarily go on the same kind of investigative hunt that I did.
Yeah, I love the fact that you call out the Zabbix has specific metric strings that will pull in, right? There's especially because you can effectively generate a metric string on almost any keyword, right? Like you can really blow that up if you're not careful, right? So understanding what metrics we care about from an ingest perspective and what we're looking for is important.
Yeah, 100%. And so I didn't see it called out in the documentation when I kind of went through the exercise over the last few weeks. So I did. I will say just in general, if you're using one of the out of the box integrations and you can see, metrics on the tool side that aren't making their way into the platform, that would be one place that I would check. Each integration has a script include that kind of instantiates the functionality. I would just look in there. In the case of the Zabbix integration, it's very verbosely commented. It's like, here are the metric strings that we will recognize, and so it does a couple of things. One is it lets you kind of set expectations as to what metrics you're going to get in out of the box, as well as providing the capability, like so much of the platform, there's the ability to create, if it doesn't quite get across the goal line, you can add your own customization to get it the rest of the way. And this is no different. It's just a script include. You can, pursuant to my second bullet from the bottom, you can make a copy. Don't definitely, try and avoid, like anything else in the platform, try and avoid going in and directly modifying the out of the box stuff, because that'll introduce technical debt when it comes time for plugin updates or platform upgrades. So definitely, copy something off to the side, but you can totally do that. I kind of played around with that a little bit, and it was, like as with any other JavaScript module within the platform, it was pretty straightforward. I will say the Zabbix one in particular, it's focused on the more traditional CI types, servers primarily.
Yeah.
So if you're, one of my initial experiments was I stood up an instance of Zabbix in one of my Kubernetes clusters and had it instrumenting the cluster. And what I found was that it wasn't really pulling in any Kubernetes or container oriented data from a metrics perspective. But it 100% is extensible to do that. And this would be one of those use cases. Yeah. I mean, the other thing that, Mike, I think you were playing around with Prometheus, right? You were trying to see, was there kind of a short path where you could take metrics out of Prometheus and just pump them into this thing?
Yep.
And I think you kind of found there's nothing really out of the box,
No.
right? So
yeah, it has a basically a remote write capability, Prometheus remote write, which will basically copy all metrics out of a particular Prometheus instance and ship it off to any other Prometheus instance, or anything that will speak that language. The problem is that that remote write capability is great. It's literally like 3 lines to turn it on in the Prometheus deployment, but ultimately it's a rather unique format that our metrics ingest is not properly prepared to ingest, right? So I had toyed around with the idea of building like a script include to like ingest that data and parse it and format it. Unfortunately, time got the better of me and I did not get that done. But I'd like to do that in the near future because I do think if we could get that Prometheus remote write API capability, it would make ingesting metrics from any Kubernetes cluster very, very easy. So it's worth exploring.
And so the other thing just to be aware of is, and I'll kind of walk through that when I show some examples live on the platform. So we've been in the process of moving and consolidating all our managing and configuring and finding all of our integrations into something called the integrations launchpad, just a consolidated user experience, one-stop shop for all kinds of integrations into the ITOM capabilities. So all of these existing and the new metric ingestion options are visible within Integration Launchpad, but in the case of the 2 new ones that I tested out, Zabbix and SolarWinds, they're not completely onboarded. So you can see them and you can find them, but then when you click on them to go configure them, it takes you back to kind of the traditional form-based configuration. And so along those lines, there's some diagnostics that the integrations launchpad will put up just to give you an idea how many transactions are flowing through the integration. And right now, those new ones will show zero, kind of zero activity. It'll say it's enabled, but it'll say, 0 events received. And I attribute that to the fact that they're not completely onboarded into the integration launchpad. So that's just something to be aware of. The first time I saw it, I was like, why am I getting no metrics? And then I looked at my CIs and I had metrics. So it's just a little bit incongruous right now. That's just kind of a symptom of it's kind of a rolling process to convert the configuration forms for each integration into the more user-friendly kind of wizard-based approach that Integration Launchpad provides. So just something to be aware of.
And every conversation that I've had is with that development team is like, oh, we're working on that. We're doing it kind of like piece by piece, next step by next step.
Oh, yeah.
So they're all aware of it and it's on the roadmap to get cleared up. It's just, here's where we're at today.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I think that's it for slides. Let's hop on the platform and I'll walk through some examples.
For the record, this is delicious.
It sounded like it was going to be good.
Yeah. It's not as sweet as I was expecting it to be.
Huh. Sometimes that's a good thing. I find sometimes the really sugary stuff can just be really kind of overpowering and heavy feeling.
It's too much.
Okay. So I'll start on integrations launchpad because even with the caveat that I just mentioned, the nice thing about it is it's a one-stop kind of place to see what integrations are present on your instance at any given time, as well as show you what's activated, what's enabled and configured and actively kind of doing things. And so a quick way to see what all your options are when it comes to metrics is just use the pull down. And so we've got 2 options. You can either use agent client collector monitoring to pull in various metric data sets, or you could go to the pull, which will then show you everything that's currently available. And then so I've already got a couple of these configured, so I'll kind of pivot over to my installed integrations panel. And it was really, so setting it up, the two that I went through, the SolarWinds and the Zabbix metrics, really easy to do. So this is kind of where the two experiences kind of bifurcate. There's a lot of integrations that give you kind of that wizard-based experience. They just haven't onboarded the Zabbix or the SolarWinds connectors to do that yet. So essentially, all I had to give it was the Zabbix credential stored in the platform, and then the IP address. And then there's some parameters down here, which are tailored to the environment. The base URL goes here. And yeah, it's got debug flags that you can turn on, which when I was playing around with this in my Kubernetes environment was really useful, because that was a lot more kind of, this is pointing at one of our kind of fairly robust lab environments called Crucible within ServiceNow. And so this was kind of a lot more of a predictable environment. So I didn't find the need to really turn on a whole bunch of debugging. It lets you tune things, and there's some guidance. Actually, that's another reason to look at the script include. There was actually some tuning guidance as far as parameters to set and what values to give them in the comments of the script include. So just, that's just for better or worse, that's a good resource to just kind of peruse and see if there's any kind of call outs that may have not made it into the official documentation yet. And yeah, that's basically other than that, just it's kind of important to select an eligible mid server. And what I mean by that is, as with other mid server capabilities, you don't get metrics ingestion when you spin up a pristine mid server. You do have to kind of go to that mid server and then enable the capability, which will spin up kind of purpose built API endpoints for use ingesting metrics. And so kind of the two key tabs on the mid server form are making sure that either all or operational intelligence or both are selected on the supported applications.
Hey,
and from a
can we pause for a second there?
yeah.
We should talk really quickly about, go back to the supported applications. We should talk really quickly about how we should be really careful with using all on supported applications and capabilities, right? I've run into multiple customers recently where almost all the mid servers are all set up with all without properly defining that. And that can cause some overlap or confusion around which mid servers can do what things, right? In particular, things like, like the container image scanning capability getting picked in the wrong mid server. So there's a lot of tweaks there that we should be thinking about. And all is almost, it's almost bad practice. Like almost. Like I'm not quite ready to say that, but it's pretty close. And then I noticed, Troy, you had your hand up.
Hi. Yeah. So you really hit on a great point there. I actually talked about it at one of the knowledge events a few years ago. I call it falling into the owl trap. And you're right. If you're deploying ServiceNow in a smaller shop or for a business where you don't have multiple data centers or multiple lines of business, then it's probably fine. You probably have, God mode credentials and you can just see everything and do everything. But yeah, in reality, you start to run into issues where, it's utilizing the wrong credentials or it just causes a lot of problems. So yeah, it
Yep.
definitely makes sense to, define them, whether it's, like for discovery as an example, right? And, or cloud or whatever, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's key.
And there's another key point there as we start thinking about architecturally deploying something like operational intelligence, metric intelligence, right? In a lot of cases, it actually makes sense to deploy multiple dedicated mid servers that are specifically just doing this metric intelligence ingestion for scalability purposes and also ensuring that it's not impacting the rest of your operations, right? So getting very specific about what that looks like from your application capability, applications, supported application setting, and also your capabilities setting, right, is really important so that we do that properly. So sorry for the derail, but I think it's something worth calling out here.
Yeah, that's a great point. And well, and it's timely because we were both on that email thread where the poor guy was getting um, a Windows mid kept trying to scan his container images, which
Yep.
that just doesn't, the two don't mix today, right? You have to have a Linux mid to scan container images. And there's, as you kind of build out your capabilities, you're going to run into those boundaries sooner than later,
Yep.
whether it's having like, and it's definitely, it's that quick and dirty, all trap is an apt term because that's the easiest thing, right? You're spinning something up, you just say, yeah, everything. And then you can set it and forget it. The problem is when you forget about it, then when it does start to bite you, you've kind of, what's going on? Why is
Right.
the correct mid server not getting the work? And so, yeah, it's just one of those things where in most cases it'll come back to bite you if you don't kind of put the thought into it up front. Like if you're doing a throwaway sandbox environment or whatever, then certainly, I mean, that's probably the genesis of the all capability, right? Was just giving people the ability not to have to get wrapped around the axle just to get some simple, use case stood up and working. But
Yep.
definitely, once you start kind of branching out into, okay, these, we're going to do discovery, we're going to ingest logs, we're going to ingest metrics, we're going to do orchestration.
Yep.
Very quickly, you're going to find you need to really leverage supported apps, capabilities, and IP ranges to guide the work to the right mid server. So super, super worth mentioning. So yeah, so for my exercise, yeah, I admit I don't have pristine all trap hygiene in my kind of crash and burn lab environments, but I do find even in those environments I have to use it. Case in point, the container scanning stuff.
Yep.
If I want to discover Windows, I've got to have a Windows mid, but if I want to scan containers in the same instance, I've got to have a Linux mid, and I've got to make sure I manage those capabilities so that the Linux mid is the one that gets to do the container scanning. So I did do a little bit of a better job on my capabilities in this environment. I don't have any all in here, and I do call out that this mid is eligible for metrics. The other piece, because it just actually bit me, I had been traveling the last couple of days, so I hadn't looked at this environment until this morning, and I went in here, and all of a sudden I'm getting an error on my integrations where it's saying, oh, you don't have a metric capable mid server available. And I'm looking, and the mid server is all, it's there, it says it's up, it's complaining about the same using the same user ID for multiple mids, which that's like, I'm not going to do a separate user for every single mid
Right.
in this kind of environment. I'm just too much to keep track of. But then I noticed that at the time, the extension context that gets spun up. So basically, when you use this related link, set up metric intelligence, and then you do the extension. So that'll enable the capability. It also creates an extension context. And if this extension context is down, then the platform is smart enough to know that invalidates it as being eligible to receive metrics. So you got to make sure that your extension contexts are all up and running, or else your whatever capabilities they are facilitating will not be functional.
And that's like wholly separate processes, or a single process per extension context, or in some cases in metric intelligence, it's multiple processes that are running on the mid server, right? And so like, I mean, for lack of a better word, right, like it's a it's an executable that's like actually a running process on the mid server that can get killed or die, or like error out for whatever various reasons. And so like you got to keep that thing up and running, and if it dies, it's aware of it, it communicates back to the mid server and lets the platform know. So it does the same thing with the ACC ingest, and like the upfront web server. So there's a ton of similar extension contexts like that all have to be sort of like maintained at that same level.
Yep, exactly. So after kind of making sure you've got an eligible mid, and then configuring your integration, it will kind of keep a running tally of kind of the last collection runtime, and then the last result, the last status. And then if you do get an error, it'll put synopsis of the error messages in here. And then at that, if you get that, that's when you take advantage of these debug flags and just kind of look on your mid to see what, to take a deeper look to see what's going on. And then basically what happens once you've got those metrics flowing is when you get an alert, one spot where the fruit of those labors appears is on the metrics tab for alerts, where it'll actually, for the CI that is the subject of the given alert, it'll show you if there's pertinent metric data available that's been ingested. It'll show you that here. And then it also gives you the ability to kind of page out to Metric Explorer, where you can kind of tailor what metrics that are available you are digging into. So this is an example where I've got metrics coming in from SolarWinds. Let's see, I think this one. So this is an example coming from Zabbix. I did have a little, our lab environment. I think the Zabbix tenant went down for some amount of times. That's why we've got kind of a jump in time between data points. But, kind of just the illustration is still valid. And within this metric explorer kind of sub tab, you can pick and choose which metrics you want to pull in. And then so the kind of the window dressing that you're seeing there is that's metric intelligence at work, where it establishes what it calls a confidence band, and essentially will generate, left to its own devices, it'll generate what it believes are reasonable metrics. And that's the logic behind that has been constantly kind of improved and updated over the years. They've added multiple statistical models and kind of an auto detection, where when it feeds that data into the machine learning model, it evaluates the data, and then based on what those values look like over time, it will select kind of what it thinks is the most applicable statistical model to apply. And again, not going to get too deep into the metric intelligence piece, because that is a pretty deep topic, but I definitely encourage you, if you want to kind of really get deep on that, ask for a deep dive into metric intelligence from your account team.
Really quick before you shift off of this,
Yep.
the little check mark that says show alerts on CI, up there? Any of them. Yep. I love that, right? Like, show me where on this timeline bad things happened, right?
Yep.
Um, yeah, so horribly useful to see that in correlation with the metrics right there on the timeline. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great call out. I don't know how many days I'd been playing around with this before I even noticed that thing was there. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty sweet
yeah.
because it gives you that kind of immediate correlation between, okay, this is what actually tripped up an alert. And it gives you some insight too, because you can compare like when a traditional IT alert showed up with when things started stepping out of bounds. It gives you kind of an idea as to how far in front of something you could be if you just decide to um, create a promotion rule that takes an anomaly alert and sends it up to sends it up to the big show and turns it into an IT alert.
Hey, quick thing. There was a request to see what a shorter time period would look like on that.
Well, this one I might need
There you go.
to. Yeah, I mean, let me go to the SolarWinds one because, like I said, the Zabbix kind of went out for a coffee break earlier today, so it has kind of this big jump in. So here's like a 3 hour time span,
Mm-hmm.
1 hour. It'll do a custom. You can do a custom time span for anything that you're pulling up.
Good stuff.
So that's an example of out of the box. What happens if you've got a tool that you built yourself and it creates a lot of useful metrics? You want to get those into ServiceNow. So, like I said, there's a couple really good articles on community site. There's one that actually goes into here's how to create essentially your own version of an out of the box integration, and that talks about here's how to write the JavaScript to run on the mid server and basically just create what at the end of the day is your own version of one of these out of the box integrations. And it's detailed, um, probably more time intensive than just creating your own kind of shim script, kind of like what you talked about, Mike, with okay, we can get metrics pushed out of Prometheus, but they're going to be in some kind of a format that we're not necessarily able to ingest directly. So you could feed that into, and I've had actually pretty good luck lately with Copilot, where I say, given a payload that looks like this, write code in Python, Golang, JavaScript, whatever, to change it so it looks like this. And bless its heart, Copilot's been doing a pretty good job for me in the last at least for the last several months, to kind of at least get me 80% of the way there. So maybe that's a more attractive option for some folks where they've got, they can get the data out. It just needs some tweaking before it can get sent into the API endpoint. And that may be a quicker path as opposed to going the full route of creating your own. Basically, it's kind of like your own scoped app with a bunch of specific JavaScript that's required to kind of have it all work within the metric intelligence framework. And so there's an article about how to do that. It's actually a 3-part series that Renko Lengers created several months ago. And so I just went to that and I followed that, the first installment, and I got data flowing in. And so within about half an hour. So I'm going to kind of just show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go over to my mid server. And so this script is literally pretty much a carbon copy of what's in that community article. And there's links to actually both of those community articles that I just mentioned in the show notes when we send those out. So don't feel like you've got to, grab screenshots or anything like that. But this is all it takes to start getting data into Metric Intelligence. It was really clever what Remco did in his examples. He used this website that you pass at a city, and it'll give you a whole JSON dump of weather conditions from that city. And so what I'm doing is I'm getting that payload, storing that in a variable called response, then parsing out just the temperature. And I'm using this to generate temperature data, which I'm then feeding into a CI that I made up in my CMDB that's supposed to correspond to the rack of the quote unquote rack of equipment that constitutes my home lab, which is actually like 2 micro PCs under my desk. But for all intents and purposes, we're extracting that temperature key from the overall payload, and then we just so when you turn on Metric Intelligence, it'll stand up an endpoint, and it'll give you a port number, and then you can tell it whether. And Remco's article includes the specifics of how to do that as well. You can specify what port number it uses. It does have HTTPS support. For whatever reason, I hate working with certificates, so I just opted to just do this without adding the TLS layer. But it is easy to do. The hardest part is working through the PKI and working with your certificate authority, which I don't have an active CA, so I would have had to stand one up and go through doing a bunch of stuff. And then self-signed certificate is almost more trouble than it's worth, because you have to always like check exceptions for cert checks. And so I just opted not to do that. The API key is also something that gets generated on the platform side. I just opted not to put my API key out in YouTube land, so this copy of the script just omits that. But for the script that I'm actually running, I just put the API key in there. And then it just creates this kind of simplistic JSON payload where it just plugs in things like the node name, which is, in this simple example, hard-coded to the CI that I created to correspond to my home lab rack. It plugs in the temperature value, pulls the timestamp. It's generating its own timestamp within the script, because it's basically getting the script is executing on a schedule via cron tab in this case. But it's to make this production strength, obviously you'd make it more robust. You could pull your key from your approved credential store, et cetera. But it's just a shell script, and it's just using curl to post this JSON payload into that endpoint. And then so what that looks like is, so this is what's called Insights Explorer, used to be called Metric Explorer. It's kind of the built-in query tool that lets you pull any metric data that's known to your instance into this view, and then you can actually you can export it a number of different ways. It's really what I find it's valuable for is this kind of diagnostic, just to get a sense of what metric data is being pulled in, what does it look like, what are the values, validate that you're actually getting what you expect. And so this is what I'm getting is temperature data, which is getting fed in from this, which I can show you what it looks like actually running it. It's fairly sparse output. Yeah, so it's basically just it does kind of pull back just a diagnostic message saying here's the current temperature, and then it confirms that it did successfully post the data to that endpoint on the mid server. And so, yeah, I've got a CI for my rack of home lab equipment, and I'm monitoring the temperature. And then what'll happen over time, metric intelligence will develop an expectation as to what's considered normal for that. And then if we do get a temperature spike, it will create one of those anomaly alerts. And if we've got rules in place to promote those anomaly alerts, and you can, it's really just an added layer so that if you get kind of an edge case anomaly, it won't automatically just generate an IT alert for the first occurrence. You can say it's got to happen for 10 minutes in a row, or it's got to be, you can apply whatever kind of filtering you want. But the data's going in there, and you can kind of just lather, rinse, repeat this for any kind of metric source, and really kind of take advantage of this analytics capability that you're just kind of getting. If you're using if you have event management, chances are you're on like ITOM Pro or ITOM Health. You've got this capability at your disposal.
So there was a quick question about the service graph connectors for integrations that would normally have metric data. And should that work to ingest the metric data, and will that happen with more SG connectors in the near future?
That does seem to be the trend. I think it'll be driven at this point because we've got service observability as well. It'll probably be like they're kind of in co-opetition at the moment, I think. So it'll be driven by customer sentiment and interest going forward. I know they're actively we track a lot of metrics within the platform, and a lot of it has to do with usage. And there's definitely, like any other company, ServiceNow's got finite resources and like infinite opportunities to take those resources and use them to enhance other pieces of functionality. And so the big rudder for that is customers expressing interest and saying, hey, we really want to see this. So I would say leverage your account team. Like if you've got a tool and you're interested in, and we don't ingest metrics out of the box, and you're interested in seeing that, account team, the idea portal also is that's more for like crowdsourcing. If you've got something out there, you might as well throw it in the idea portal, because worst case is nobody else upvotes it, but generally you're not alone. And if you see an idea out there, you upvote it. I think last time I checked, 10 votes was the threshold. So if something gets 10 votes on the idea portal, that pushes it to the next level of kind of consideration. That's kind of like the entry criteria where the product team will kind of pursue getting additional kind of customer feedback to see try and gauge what the appetite is for that feature or capability. So that's the direction with any of the service graph connector for observability plugins seems to be, is to pull metrics in as well as kind of the CMDB related stuff, at least to kind of bundle it into the same kind of setup experience. Because really service graph connector, that uses iHub ETL most of the time, which is a completely separate capability to the metrics ingestion, but at least it puts the setup kind of under one umbrella for you.
Agreed. So we're right at time. Let's shift gears back to the wrap up. Was there anything else you wanted to show?
No, that's everything I wanted to show. And so before we kind of skip to the airing of grievances, open forum, if you want to just pop up the teaser slide for next episode, just to reiterate, it's going to be part 2 of our Tanium crossover with Tanium Tech Tips. The field is still at least somewhat open as far as which particular Tanium integration or integrations we're going to dig into. So if you do have any strong thoughts there, feel free to either stick it in the chat, or you could shoot us a kind of a response when you get the show notes that's got our kind of shared mailbox on there that you can use. Or if you go to our microsite, there's a contact us link there. So we've got a few different ways that you can reach out if you want to kind of express interest or thoughts in particular Tanium, ServiceNow synergy that you'd like us to touch on next month. And yeah, so the I'll update the microsite so that when you click like register for latest webinar, that'll start pointing at the August session shortly, now that we're through the July session. And yeah, hope to see you all there. It's gonna be really cool.
Yep. Looking forward to it. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Looking forward to chatting more. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, and then we will open it up for Q&A.